So hello, I think that I'm streaming live now. Again, I'm going to wait for a little bit just to make sure that people's video feed catches up, that I can get some feedback concerning the sound. This is a lot earlier than I usually do these things. I've got my cup of coffee here, Nick Fuentes style. So I wanted to do a live stream, a DistAns, just concerning, well, more or less a bunch of objections. I've made about 3 or 4 videos in the last 2 weeks that have basically pissed off pretty much everybody on the YouTube community. And I felt that would be a good time to just do a really, really cute, really quick, really quick distance concerning various objections where I see the state of counter-progressive movements and where I see the state of just the YouTube community in general. Okay, yeah, the reason why it's the morning for me, well, I've actually been up for quite some time now. It's the late morning for me since I'm on the far west coast. So that's why this is morning edition. And I'm starting it promptly at 11. I'm not late at all. And I'm going to be ending it promptly at 12:30. So this will last exactly an hour and a half. Now, of course, you can use I have the... on Twitter, I have the hashtag up. So if you want to forward me anything, then you can go ahead and do that. Obviously, this is the chance to ask me questions about anything you'd like or any issues that are going on in the news currently. If you want to ask me a question, please use the @DistributDist tag, or obviously I'll read super chats. This is obviously since this is so much earlier than my usual DistAns streams. I think pretty predictably there's going to be a lot fewer people watching. I would be surprised if we crack much more than 150 because most of my subscribers are essentially night owls because I'm a night owl. So one thing I wanted to say, so I'm doing this stream now for an hour and a half. And I imagine I'm gaining subscribers more quickly than I did earlier this year, which is not saying much. I essentially had plateaued a little bit before this month. But I understand that at some point my live streaming is going to be a little bit intrusive to people who just want to watch the edited videos. Because my live streaming temperament and my live streaming persona is just altogether different from what I bring to edited videos. So I'm considering essentially making a split off channel at the time when I reach 20,000 subscribers. Okay, so Charlie Adams says, will you be objecting to today? I want to talk a little bit about the alt-right. I want to explain the future of this channel. I want to go over a few leftist videos that are very, very quick. And then I want to answer anyone's questions. Obviously, the DistAns series, unless I have something specific to discuss, it can be driven by people who are watching. They can ask me anything that they'd like. So with that being said, I'm going to wait for about 5 more minutes for people to fill into the chat and tell me what they want to hear. But sans that, I'm just going to go over what I've been talking about for a while. There's one thing I did want to say, and I wanted to say this for, I kind of need to give a PSA about this. So last year, I did sort of a radio broadcast that I enjoyed very much that I called Vox Mortuus, which is the voice of the dead. And this was essentially a 6-hour radio broadcast where I took clips from old radio. And it was basically 6 hours of hearing music, hearing classical, jazz, narration, poetry, all from authors who were dead. All of this is radio of the older style, of the kind of variety you'd hear if you were listening to radio in the 40s and 50s. Now, I obviously included some more contemporary stuff, some more contemporary stuff from people who had passed away, just to fill it out. But my intention always was to keep this in the realm of sort of radio drama, the kind of radio you would have heard in the 1940s. And I just felt that this sort of gave a perspective, sort of just a slice, looking back onto a previous era. And what was so funny about it is, I played it for 6 hours. It went immediately off the air. It didn't sit on my channel. And immediately, like, you got like 100 copyright notifications because, they have the algorithms looking for that little clip of G.K. Chesterton saying something at a Canadian college in 1920. And some corporation has patented that, or not patented it, but they've claimed intellectual property over that clip. And so it's so funny because the whole 6-hour stream is entirely composed of people who are dead, speaking, singing, and playing music. So the whole idea that intellectual property would apply to this is insane. There's nobody alive who could collect, not a single person. So obviously there's estates involved, and more than that, there's corporate properties and lawyers. So, but I'm going to do it again tonight. Obviously, this is the eve before All Saints Day, I believe, also known as Halloween. And I feel it's a good time to sort of look back and see just what our ancestors would have listened to, or not ancestors. Well, I guess ancestors. What our forefathers, what our grandparents would have listened to if they weren't listening to things on YouTube. This is what previous generations, the radio really was YouTube of the 1930s and 40s. And so just looking back at that and seeing what we don't have today. And I think it's valuable because, well, I'll get into this a little bit when I discuss the alt-right and when I discuss the future of counter-progressive movements online. I just feel like there's this huge deficit of understanding. I want to talk specifically about Millennial Woes and about a series of videos he made. And I also want to overview a video by a leftist. But again, like I said, I'm waiting for people to stream in. I imagine we'll crack a little bit over 100. But before that, I consider it still to be sort of in startup mode. Okay, so Altmeister, shall I ask you questions now? Okay, yeah, one more thing. You can super chat the 6-hour stream that I'm going to be doing tonight if you want to. But I'm not going to, like, the whole concept of Vox Mortuus is that, like, I'm not speaking. I'm letting the past speak. So, I can't answer the super chats. Now, next time I do a DistAns, I will try to answer your super chats, and maybe the next time I do the Radio of the Dead thing, I'll set up a fund so I can give the super chats to charity, like a veterans charity or something like that. Unfortunately, I don't have the technical know-how right now to figure out how to non-anonymously make that kind of donation. So the super chats are just going to have to go into my fund. And they're not going to charity now, obviously, but that's something I've speculated to do in the future when I can't read these things out. But before I start reading actual super chats, there's another thing, the Premiere function, that I've used a few times and I'll probably will use in the future for Via Obscura Radio. And some people super chatted that. So I wanted to take a moment to read one super chat before I get to the ones that are being put into the chat right now. That was the super chat was published on October 28th for Via Obscura Radio. And it's by The Beast for $9. And he says, I used to get depressed about events like this, about how it makes conservatives look. Now I just get blue seeing every establishment group take advantage of it to malign dissidents and outlets like Gap. I think he's referring to the recent synagogue shooting. And I think that's sort of front and center of what the right is going to have to deal with right now. And we'll probably get into it as we start getting into the stream. It's still a little early for me. I'm a night owl. So I'll continue on with some super chats here. We have Disciple of Dave. Thank you. DKK $20. Glorious Dave. Stream more at European time. Well, maybe I will. I don't know. It's going to be difficult. Right now I'm kind of on a point in my life where I'm kind of in a transitional period, so I have a very flexible schedule. So I can actually do this, but it might be more difficult unless I start moving to the East Coast. Unless I move to the East Coast, and I kind of have a desire to stay on the West Coast. $9 for or $9.99, $9.99 from the Beast again. Well, thank you very much for the contribution. And he says, can you talk about the implications of the replication crisis? Does it affect twin studies and other alt-right canon? Does it hurt progressive canon more? Okay, so I mean, there's sort of two crises that are going on in this. Is a very, very complicated question, and there's sort of two. And I'm not so sure how much I can really answer this, right? Like, because when you read this is meta science, or what I would call meta science. When we talk about the replication crisis, what we're talking about is the fact that human behavior is non-independent. Our sample sizes are non-independent. They have biases to them. Moreover, psychology studies have very, very low N values, very, very low amounts of samples. So what happens is that people use statistical controls that really only work for highly repeatable physical events. They cross-apply those methods to things like social science, and then they come up with results that, when we redo them, don't pan out. So that's the replication crisis. There's also a similar crisis in these same fields called the repetition crisis. Now, the repetition crisis is the fact that you can redo a study over and over and over again until you get the right conclusion. So this was very famously lampooned in, maybe I can pull up this, there's a cartoon, so here's the cartoon. This is the cartoon that I always show. Perhaps you guys can see that. So this is the cartoon that I always. This is a cartoon from the comic that used to be funny, and I think it kind of got SJW about 5 years ago. But I used to read this religiously, called XKCD. And in addition to the replication crisis, we also have this crisis called the repetition crisis. So this is the fact that in order to get significant results, you can redo a study and look like it's and make it look like it's significant. So in this comic, one person thinks that jelly beans cause acne, like pimple breakouts, right? And so they test it and find that it doesn't pan out, right? Because jelly beans don't cause pimples, right? And then before they publish it, someone says, well, what if we test each of the individual colors, right? Maybe it's only one type of jelly powder that causes this. And so they go through and they rerun the experiment at a significance level of 95%, 20 times, and sure enough, one of the times they come up with a positive result. Well, does this show that it actually has significance? Well, no, because if you take a 95% confident experiment, meaning that it only has a false positive 5% of the time, and you run it 20 times, you should expect to get one false positive. And of course, the punchline of this comic is that you get to the end and you realize that when you read this in the newspaper or you read this in the academic literature, all you get is the result. All you get is the rejection of the null hypothesis. Now, okay, so you're right. Now, I don't know. Now, universities bias progressive. We all know that, right? And so naturally, there are going to be more studies that fall into this trap that are progressive than there are conservative. And when it comes to building shaky consensuses, you can imagine that this is going to be a huge vector of that. Now, I'm not so sure if that means that it's the progressives' fault. It certainly will hurt them more. Now, certain people like the blogger Steve Saylor have speculated that the replication and repetition crisis have been used in order to get out of making conclusions that would support race realism. But without some extensive, like arch study of studies, there's no way that I can confirm that suspicion. It remains just a conjecture. To my knowledge, it doesn't. I guess the fact that twin studies are fairly low N, so it could just be random variation, right? My understanding is that twin studies had results that were generally seen to be repeated, and so I think that that's more or less not a problem. But I mean, again, like this is the reason why I never talk about race realism. It requires too much. With most scientific consensuses, there's an establishment that takes all the studies in and they pre-digest it and they give you some kind of confidence and you trust that establishmentarian body, right? But the thing is that in order to even examine race realism or any of these other sort of anti-progressive scientific findings, we need to immediately go like, okay, there is serious corruption in academia, right? There is serious corruption in academia. That's like the starting point. So once we do that, we're just lay people pulling up articles from journals and trying to piece together what a consensus should be. And it's very, very, very difficult to do that without just dedicating your entire life to it. So this makes it very, very difficult for lay people to comment on things like this. And moreover, there's almost no incentive to do so. Because as I said, you could have the science, even if you did have the science, and you brought it to the mainstream. You can expect an admission, you can expect a denial, but that might vary. But one thing that you can't not expect is a political retaliation. That's always happened. The only time it's not happened is as if you're a progressive bringing it up. Progressives get a get out of jail free for this stuff. They can talk about it. And if you look at the Ezra Klein versus Sam Harris debate, you'll realize that his objection is, oh, well, he's a conservative. You have to retaliate against him, right? It's not just neutral. He's advocating conservative policies. So there's no incentive to bring this. In my opinion, it's just this is a political non-starter for any right-wing movement. And we'll certainly talk about that. We'll certainly talk about that as the stream goes on. Okay, so we've been doing this for 15 minutes. I think more or less the chat has stabilized. So, okay. Anyway, I'm going to wait for 5 minutes and then I'm going to start up with a few videos that, I wanted to talk about millennial woes, but I wanted to start up with a video from a leftist source, An Actual Joke. And I wanted to, he talks about tactics here. And so Millennial Woes this week has released a series of videos that has reminded me why I like Millennial Woes as a channel. It's a very honest take, not only of the status of his own channel, with a lot of hard admissions, right? He essentially says the same things that I said in my video about how the super chat killed the alt-right. But it's he comes to some very, very hard conclusions about the state of his own life, the state of the movement, and what he hopes to see going forward. I think that we can watch one of the videos here. Obviously, the series is far, far, far too long to watch. Obviously, Millennial Woes and I don't agree over race being a proper focus of anything ethically or spiritually. That's a difference of opinion. But what I admire about Millennial Woes is just the frank honesty he's able to bring to topics and self-criticism. And that leads to some really insightful moments coming out of his content, regardless of the fact that I disagree with him on any given issue. So at any rate, yeah, I mean, Millennial Woes is someone that you could say his views are wrong. You might even be able to say his views are objectionable, but though I hate that term. And to my mind, while Millennial Woes might have said some things that were, mean, I don't think he has ever done anything objectionable that I'm aware of, although maybe someone can correct me. But at any rate, regardless of whatever you say about his views, he's honest. He has a rundown of this. But I want to talk today about tactics, about how we structure a counter-progressive movement going forward. I've talked a little bit about this to my friend Royal Endeavor. I know we've discussed this on our Discord server quite a few times. And that is that the counter-progressive movement, any counter-progressive movement, has to become very, very basic. We have to go back to fundamentals because we just can't play the same game that the left does. I had Robert Mariani from the magazine Jacobite on my stream just a few days ago. We interviewed him like a week or so ago before this latest round of shootings had occurred. And he said something that was very, very important. And that was that you can't just take what the left does and think that you can redo it. You can't go like, oh, well, they have Antifa. I guess we can just do that back again. Or they're able to do these hypocrisies. Why can't we? Or any of those things. That doesn't work. The the Saul Alinsky stuff, it's interesting to see. I mean, Saul Alinsky is basically just a rehash of Machiavelli. But it's kind of interesting to see that the left has been doing this, but it's not that we can't just bust out this manual of what the left does and then do it back to them. The systems of control, the cathedral is not set up to actually accommodate that. The cathedral will always consider anti-progressive or counter-progressive movements to be a threat to them, and they will consider progressives to be more or less harmless and controllable. So that being as it may, you can't just look at progressives and go like, oh, they're doing it, why can't we? As a matter of fact, actually, there was something that I wanted to, I'm kind of going back to my Twitter feed here, and I kind of wanted to go over this article that I saw coming from the New York Times. So this is, I think you guys can see this, right? So this is an article by Michelle Goldberg, who, I don't know. What is it with feminists and bowl cuts? Every time I see this, Christy Winters is like this too. I mean, it's like they're trying to recreate the intersectional version of the Romulan Star Empire, because now every feminist has this ugly bowl cut. I think they think it's sophisticated or something, but I don't know. Bowl cuts don't work for men and they don't work for women either. But anyway, Michelle Goldberg writes this clickbaity as hell article, "We Can Replace Them." Now, if you read the article, it's about demographic coalitions, it's about electoral politics, but Michelle Goldberg is obviously calling back to an alt-right talking point about the great white replacement. You see this article, what do? Okay, well, I can already see it in the chat. How about one thing? How about we take Michelle Goldberg and put her name in echo quotes? How about we take this article and go, see, they are trying to replace us. That's what this article is designed to do. This article is designed to encourage the perception in the right that there's a giant conspiracy about replacement, so that the right repeats this talking point, so that the right gets drawn out, and so that there can be a retaliation on the part of the establishment against the people who take this bait. This is bait. This is bait. So, I mean, the right wing, it's cathartic. I mean, you can go and you can hurl insults at Michelle Goldberg. You can use this as vindication that there's this conspiracy theory to replace people. That's what they're expecting. They're expecting you to do that. And the question is, how do you win tactical games? How do you win tactical games? And there was a reason why I'm going over this before I go to the video I want to do today. You win games of tactics by making the move that your opponent does not want you to do. You don't win games of tactics by being cathartic or making the move that makes you feel strong. You make the move that your opponent does not want you to make. So what is this? This is bait. I see something in the comments. Truth is bait? Yeah, truth can be bait. Truth can be bait because, like, are we new atheists? I mean, this is another thing too, right? Like, again, like about race realism. Like, I don't know if it's true. Like, what if it is? Who knows, right? I do not have the competence to say whether it is or not for the reasons that I explained earlier in this stream. But if it is true, I know enough about how the cathedral and the establishment is set up to know that this means political retaliation. The whole, what if it is true? I mean, like, the whole thing is just, I don't need to know whether it's true or not to know that this is a tactically bad move to make. And this idea that somehow truth, like the fact that it's true, means that the universe is going to realign itself to make sure that you come out on top. That's new atheist thinking. That's Enlightenment trap thinking, right? That this is the mistake we made in the Enlightenment, that somehow cultural consensuses are derived purely from truth. And then if you speak truth, you suddenly are, I mean, again, truth. I mean, the whole thing about truth, when we bring it to scientific statements is entirely questionable, right? I know what religious truth is, right? I know what metaphysical truth is. I know what true is in a mathematical sense, right? But when it comes to statements of science, like, things are probabilistically true. So this whole truth with a capital T, that's not exactly, you can't talk about scientific propositions that way. That's not a coherent way of talking about it. You can talk about probabilities, you can talk about evidence for and against, but slapping truth on scientific propositions is I use this word too, problematic to begin with. And the same thing true for like conspiracy theories. Like, what does it mean? Like, replace them? Well, is that a conspiracy theory or not? Well, it depends, right? Like, is there a smoke-filled room where people are like planning the demise of Western civilization? No. But you could argue that some elements of demographic projection and scheming political orders that benefit from them are true. So these things don't fall into these neat little categories. And so I think that, again, like, when we talk about this, like, oh, it's true, therefore it can't be bait. It's true, therefore they can't be in political retaliations. We're thinking like new atheists. We're thinking like culture and consensus are derived out of a beaker, and they're not. So with this being said, I want to do a quick video so I don't run out of time. We're 20 minutes into this. Hopefully I'm not going too fast. I'm just checking the... Oh, well, we have 180 people. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to go over, and I have a bunch of these. So one thing I was thinking about, maybe we'll do on this DistAns, we'll go over some of the Catholic Church sex abuse stuff. I have a video from Argent Templar. I have a video from Six Hexenhammer. I think that's way too long of a topic to get into. But it's, I think ultimately that's just going to have to wait for another day. Maybe we can do a stream where there's other experts and we can talk about it that way. But I think a more productive thing to do would be to go over this fascism and the co-option of liberal tactics, because I think it'll segue into what I want to talk about concerning Millennial Woes videos and other things that have been coming out of the right wing generally.
When we look at the history of liberal revolution, we can see some tactics that were successful and some that weren't. And
okay, I've had problems with this before. I think people can hear that. It's making the OBS bar go up and down. So I'm going to wait a few minutes. But just for some background, this video is published by An Actual Joke, a smaller YouTube channel, I think an anarchist one. And he's in this video discussing tactics, which is something that I'm very interested in. And I think that if you hear this, you can hear exactly what the right wing should not be doing and what the right wing should be doing, sort of implicitly, by the fact that you can hear the left thinking aloud about what they really don't want to happen and what they really do want to happen. So if there's no sound problems, I'm going to... It's a little loud. I can turn it down a little bit. I think if I make this go like this, it'll be a little bit easier. Easier on the ears. Okay, let's turn it down here.
it is honestly a case-by-case scenario for many of these situations, but one of these tactics that needs case-by-case analysis is civil disobedience. Many of us are taught in school about the famous cases that went out, Gandhi, MLK, Mandela, etc. But in some cases, civil disobedience will not work.
So you see, now this is smart, right? Because you see immediately, civil disobedience is seen by the left almost as a religious type of political tool. And I think the left is coming to the realization that civil disobedience works only in certain circumstances. Just like speaking truth to power only works in some circumstances. Okay, so Gandhi was interviewed, I think, in 1946, about how his ideas of peaceful civil disobedience would work and not work. Now, obviously, everyone knows that Gandhi had a lot of success fighting British imperial power and essentially bringing a close to the last part of the British Empire in India by forming civil resistance against the occupying powers. And this was very, very effective, largely because the British public was incredibly averse to seeing British troops bashing Indian protesters over, say, things like taxes on salt or any other British imperial controls. And because of this power relationship, because of the fact that the British government had to answer to a British people who are fundamentally not sympathetic to imperialism, this worked very, very well. Now, Gandhi was famously asked what he would recommend the Jews do about the Nazis, about the Holocaust, about the final solution. And Gandhi said, well, they should just civilly resist the Nazis. I'm not so sure that will work. It's a ridiculous concept because the Nazis had a totalitarian control over the state apparatus about the narrative that was going on. And the only reason civil disobedience works is that your civil disobedience is captured by friendly media with cameras and news organizations, and then it's projected over to some other group that has some stake in the fact that its authority is not being brutal to you. And if you have that relationship, civil disobedience works, but it does not ordinarily. So I'm going to continue playing this video.
First, it is important to review the winning cases of civil disobedience,
aka the boring ones.
Martin Luther King Jr. and Gandhi are the cases we will consider successes to an extent. Both didn't get to achieve their full goals, though, as they tried to peacefully reform too much too fast for the status quo to deal with. As well, the radicals in the back of their movement were not peacefully resisting, but doing the dirty work of violence, while the peaceful leaders benefited.
Okay, well that's interesting. We could argue exactly how much the violence helped any of these causes. In my opinion, they didn't. But I mean, at least we're at the point where we understand that civil disobedience isn't some magic cure-all, and neither is speaking truth to power.
But I digress. To think of civil disobedience, let's go to Henry David Thoreau. All men recognize the right of revolution, that is, the right to refuse allegiance to and to resist the government when its tyranny or its inefficiency are great and unendurable.
That is false. That is manifestly false. This is back to what I consider the Enlightenment brain bug that I saw when we got the comments about how truth couldn't possibly be bait. Truth can be bait, and not all men desire revolution or resist tyrannies. These are conditional statements that are totally dependent on the culture at the time. We have no reason to expect that they're going to continue into the future. They have a tendency in some circumstances to be correct. I think that if you have a cultural understanding of what people consider to be illegitimate uses of force, then you can say if man is culturally conditioned to experience some type of government force as tyrannical, then they will recognize the application of that type of force as unendurable. That modification of Thoreau's construction might actually be true, but this one is false.
Unjust laws exist. Shall we be content to obey them? Or shall we endeavor to amend them and obey them until we have succeeded? Or shall we transgress them at once? One would think that a deliberate and practical denial of its authority was the only offense never contemplated by government. Else, why is it not assigned its definite, its suitable and proportionate penalty? A man has not everything to do, but something, and because he cannot do everything, it is not necessary that he should do something wrong.
I don't know. We're just getting a lot of quotes, and they seem to be somewhat contradicting each other. I'm going to let the video go on, just adding a comment here to check any questions or whatnot that are going on. Again, guys, I'm not going to necessarily see any questions unless they have the @distributist or our super chats. So just fair warning in advance.
I simply wish to refuse allegiance to the state, to withdraw and stand aloof from it effectually.
I really doubt that's going to be a principle of progressivism going forward, because I believe that the right is going to be the ones asking for separatism, and the left will be denying separatism to right-wing forces. I guarantee it. I guarantee it.
I believe these sentiments capture the original intent of civil disobedience as a concept. It has a time and place to be specifically applied to. It can't work for everything, but it's worthwhile if the politics are moral. But something different has happened. Something horrid. It is up...
It's horrid. It's horrid. That's such a... I mean... I don't know. Does it, maybe other people have this bias? Does anyone like they whenever they hear horrid, they imagine like some 60-year-old like British woman clutching her pearls? And I don't know. It's real.
It's of my belief that in recent times it is the goal of fascists to appear as if they are the ones in civil disobedience, as to make themselves seem noble in their goals. Take an example. Fascists love to manipulate the arguments around free speech so that they can gain and maintain a platform within a conversation of traditionally liberal values and claim their rights are under attack when they don't have a platform. The fascists and their sympathizers will try to make themselves seem as the martyrs of leftist violence.
So, I mean, I guess I'm not going to argue the veracity of this. I mean, we all know that this, on the face of it, the left has no philosophical leg to stand on. They've been arguing for years that corporate censorship was a thing, that being denied a platform in universities, being denied a job by your employer because, say, you were a communist, which was very, very common in the days of the blacklistings, that was a form of censorship. This was the line on and on and on from 1946 onward. Like, censorship was not just a government extension, but was any application of force to stifle a debate. This had always been the leftist objection, and they changed it in the last 5 years. I guess I don't want to repeat it here, but we're just noting that what in this video is the left afraid of? What is the move they don't want the right to make? That's how we should be watching this right now.
So it is important that they can never achieve that narrative. There needs to be provocation on any action against them. No matter how right it may seem, the narrative that they are at all under attack and not being pushed back against can never be allowed.
I think he just showed his hand. What does he not want the narrative to be? He doesn't want to be the narrative that the right wing is under attack.
Most leftist anti-fascists are aware of this matter, but there's a problem. Liberals are getting involved. The problem is not their opposition to fascism. The problem is their tactics. Liberals have a tendency to just act, and do it impulsively. Anti-fascism is a very organized, specific action for a reason. If it's not in response to something, but a preventative action, it allows the fascists to spin their narrative.
Okay, so yeah, anti-fascists are not organized. You don't get Portland. You don't get them stopping cars with 60-year-old veterans in them if they were organized. They are out of control and incredibly disorganized. This is him, well, to borrow a Catholic wench term, vapping himself over how in control the anti-fascists are and how they understand everything. They don't understand this, and if they let these thugs go loose, they will make mistakes that will give the right their optics back again. And that's a weakness. I think he realizes this, but since the purpose of this video is to put the liberals on trial, he can't actually say that.
The lack of standard anti-fascism from the divide of leftist tactics and liberal tactics leads to an unclear narrative and conflation of all anti-fascists, and gives the fascists a platform to grow. Without a solid anti-fascist tactic complete across all lines, the fascists win. Let's examine two examples, one that's the right tactic and one that's the wrong tactic. The correct example here is when Richard Spencer was scared off, punched, and glitter-bombed when he was making a big deal about being in support of Assad. This is a solid example because it exposes him for his fascist rhetoric and shuts him down, and makes him scared for doing such.
Okay. He thinks that this was a victory. I don't think it was, and I am a huge critic of Spencer.
This is a response to his direct ideological actions, and that is why this violence can be justified. The incorrect example, while being able to be seen as a victory, was not. It was when Spencer was kicked out of the gym. This was right in the sense that he's a Nazi, he shouldn't be allowed anywhere. But, as stated before, this wasn't in response to an immediate ideological action.
I always, and this might be something that I could get to before 12:30, but I probably won't. I mean, he shouldn't be allowed anywhere, so he shouldn't be allowed in a grocery store. Should he be allowed to buy food? Should he be allowed to have a bank account? Like, exactly what should a person who is a fascist or a Nazi or a white nationalist be able to do in this conception? And say, for instance, Richard Spencer says he is not a white nationalist anymore and is rather a civic nationalist or an urbanist or sort of a Steve Turley style new nationalist. Pardon me. Excuse me. I guess I have a phone ringing in the background. I thought I turned it off. Okay, so sorry about that. So yeah, if Richard Spencer was to reform his position and to be a a civic nationalist. Would he be allowed into these institutions? Almost certainly not, right? Because people would be going, what people would say, the left would be saying, oh, well, this is a cover. This is a veil for his racist beliefs. Like they do right now. I mean, Richard Spencer isn't actually a Nazi, regardless of what ContraPoints says. And so it just means that if they can smear you into a category, they can deny you everything. And, well, we'll go on because this isn't the exact point I wanted to make here.
Sure, it was in response to him being a Nazi, but the issue is he wasn't being a Nazi out loud there. And that allows him to spin a narrative to sympathizers that he's being targeted, as he proceeded to do for the next 2 weeks. While the action itself was correct, the timing not being after himself exposing his own horrid rhetoric is the issue. The person who did it was right in action, but not in timing. It wasn't thought out. At least.
I mean, the idea that Antifa is going to organize these things so that they're perfectly timed is incorrect. But look at what he's afraid of. He's afraid of the left losing the narrative through optical failures. And this is something that, if you look at leftist media, this is what they talk about. This is what they're actually afraid of.
Not thought out enough. We cannot seem to be the instigators in our fight of fascism. However right we may be in opposing them, they must start the action. Otherwise, they can claim martyrdom. I would like to point out that the fascists and their sympathizers using this tactic, that the specific tactic is in Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radical.
So I want the people who are watching to internalize this. The left benefits from any proactive action on the right. The right is reactionary because it must be reactionary, because the preemptive action is essentially excluded from our toolbox. I don't think that we are excluded from preactive cultural actions. I don't think we're excluded from preemptive spiritual community building, positive the development of roots at a networking level. But insofar as political action is concerned, insofar as actually putting forward something, unfortunately, the position that the cathedral has, the position that the culture, but when I say cathedral, I just mean cultural consensus, more or less equivalent. The position that the cultural consensus has us in means that right-wing or counter-progressive political actions are necessarily going to have to be reactive. So this is something that he's saying right here. He does not want the right to be in a reactive mode. He wants the right to overextend itself and be in a proactive mode because he understands that that is what the right cannot do in the current cultural consensus.
Real action is the enemy's reaction. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that is rule number 13. This applies to both anti-fascists and fascists. We must be seen in reaction immediately. By no means am I saying we shouldn't be there wherever fascists are organizing and be present. I'm saying be present and ready to respond immediately. Delaying your response to a place where it doesn't seem relevant, like a week or two later at a gym, makes it seem as if we were the instigators.
Which they are. We know that, right? We know that they are the instigators. And, you know, if you do an instigating action, then you are an instigator, right? I'm not saying, I mean, I'm on the right. Do I think that there's never been an instigated action by the right? Of course not. But it's it's not like you can't do this macrocosmically. You can't go like, oh, well, that since they instigated a month ago, our proactive action here isn't instigating anything. That's ridiculous. That's leftist thinking, where you can model history as this force between the good and the bad side, and therefore actions, when they're put in their simplest form, can be recontextualized to be the opposite of those actions. This just gets you nowhere. He's making a tactical mistake right here. He doesn't understand how his own thought traps are making him, leading him into that tactical mistake.
In order to make sure that they cannot control the narrative, we must employ tactics that allow for them to always be explained as the aggressors. We must make it impossible for them to spin it to support themselves.
They can't do that, though. That is something that we have control over. That is something that the right has control over. That is something that the counter-progressive forces have the right control over. They cannot control that.
If they cannot control the narrative, their true nature can be shown. We must pick our battles and know when to arrive to deliver swift defense and when to lay low and let the fascists waste their efforts.
Yeah, good luck doing that with a totally decentralized organization, I can tell you that.
We must unify anti-fascist tactics, otherwise the fascists can spin their narrative and we lose. So liberals, please stop doing what you've been doing and start doing the right thing.
Okay, but what's so funny about this is that liberals aren't the people he was complaining about. The one example of a bad action he listed in this video was Antifa trying to get Spencer fired from a gym. I don't think it was the liberals who did that. This was not like the Dave Rubins weren't behind that. That was people like Antifa doing that. It was a splinter cell of Antifa, but, of course, we're reframing it. So it was the liberals doing that. But it's, this has to be reframed because this guy is Antifa sympathetic.
Sincerely, the radical left. I'd like to thank you for watching.
Okay, well, that just contextualizes what I want to be going over in the last 45 minutes of this stream, and that is just the prospects for the future on the right. And I think I'll be going over Millennial Woes and his videos very briefly. I need to pull up my my DistAns subjects again and get rid of this. But I'll be pulling up that very briefly so that we can talk about it. But I think I have a super chat that just got I see here while I was doing this. So Spec7Re82 for $9.99. Thank you very much. What do you see? I think it's what do you see as a tactic for accelerating the left? For example, infiltrating Antifa or petitioning your neighborhood to have Transgender Day at the local elementary school. Too dishonest? Too risky? I don't think false flag attacks work. I think that at some point you're going to be exposed by moderate liberals as being, how are you going to do this? I don't think that you can. First of all, infiltrating Antifa is something you might be able to do for a day, like 2 days. And if you have like cameras and you're going to capture them showing off like contraband or something like that, that's fine. But if you're going to infiltrate Antifa to the point where you're acting as the leaders, that's going to be nearly impossible. Unless you're just going to give up your life and go deep cover, which is something that almost no one can do. Eventually, you're going to show your power level. You're going to get shunted to the bottom of the line. And if you're part of an ethnic group that the progressives don't like, then you might get shunted to the bottom of the line, the back of the line, just because. It's a little dishonest. The right benefits in this whole struggle. It's important to understand that if we are correct, the right does benefit from honesty. The right does benefit from forgiveness. The right does benefit from humanity. And so doing false flag attacks is something, it's almost certainly not going to work in the long term. And if you're doing this so that you can make them accelerate, it's almost certainly not likely to work. The one exception is the internet. And the internet, and like leaving aside sort of the ethical problems of dishonesty, the right has succeeded in pushing the left into acceleration on the internet because everyone's anonymous. But nothing in person like this will ever work. The examples of the right pushing the left into extremism on the internet has been something like shout your abortion. I believe that came out of poll, and then the left started using the hashtag, which is really funny. But again, we benefit from honesty, right? And I think that once you are shown to be dishonest, it's very, very difficult to get the credibility back again. And the only thing we can do as people who are counter-progressive is to seize credibility back. That's what we lack being out of power, and that's what the left has. So the left can be dishonest, and their credibility is largely not hurt because they have this stored up authority they have for being in alignment with the cultural consensus. And we do not have that luxury, right? We cannot be that dishonest. Again, we shouldn't be dishonest because it's unethical. But we just can't, because tactically we do not have the resources. If we're caught to be dishonest, right, we don't have like a bunch of people in the media going like, shucks guys, that was just fun and games, right? The media is not going to play it that way. The academy is not going to play it that way. And they're going to blacklist you for doing that. So that tactic it may work in some sectors of the internet, but it's not a proper tactic to use in any kind of real world scenario where you're using your real name and your real networking. So thank you for the super chat. I think that I'm going to Well, what happened? I'm going to have to reload this chat. It seems to be stuck. Okay. All right, there we go. Back down. Okay. So okay, hey Dave, you should have another chat with the Rebel Yell guys. Less rushed this time. They're laid back Christian Southerners. Well, sure. I could have them on, or they could have me on. I have no problem with that. I have no problem talking with anyone. I mean, obviously, I think TRS is terrible optics, but if Roaming Millennial can talk to Richard Spencer, I can talk to people on the alt-right. It's, I don't think there's a problem. And I think when it comes to people like Millennial Woes, I think I certainly should be talking to them, especially with his more recent videos. It's convinced me that he's seeing the same problems that I've thought of, or I've been noticing inside the alt-right. And so I think it's very worthwhile to have a conversation with him. So at this point, I'm going to go to Millennial Woes' channel, and I'm going to talk a little bit about, again, if you have any questions or super chats or things you want me to discuss. I should mention, somebody on Twitter told me that they wanted me to look at a Rod Dreher article. And God, I would look at that. My reaction to Rod Dreher, and I understand this is posted on the hashtag, I'm not so sure that I have time at this stage, after doing that video and wanting to do a discussion of Millennial Woes, to go over this Rod Dreher article on American Conservative. I certainly can't read through it. Largely, it's Rod Dreher doing what he's want to do at all times, which is to have this huge moral panic about little things that pop up in the ordinary course of our culture war, things that he shouldn't be surprised about. And this is what Rod Dreher does, right? He sees something that would be objectionable in the 70s. He goes, oh my God, and goes on for about 2 pages about how terrible it is, how immoral it is. And his body never seems to acclimatize that this is the new normal, and that he should be coming up with some kind of alternative, some kind of tactic going forward, not just wringing his hands every time he sees something like this. And it causes him to not see the larger picture, the larger culture war that's going on. And I think the example being forwarded to me by this user on Twitter is an example of that. And I'm going to see if I can't get him on via Obscura Radio. Rod Dreher, I think it would be a good conversation. I think it would be an excellent conversation. I might even be willing to drop some of the funds if he has a fee to get him on the channel. I try to reinvest the money I get from this channel back into making it better. Excuse me, at least for the time being. But at any rate, Rod Dreher is a quintessential example. He's not a boomer, he's an Xer, but he's a quintessential example of boomer logic, where wringing your hands and crying about how things aren't like they were in the 60s somehow does something. It doesn't. Someone's going to win the culture war. Someone's going to walk away with institutional power at the end. They're going to be able to reestablish the norms and punish their opponents. And that's the game we're playing. It's the Game of Thrones, right? I've tried to talk the left down from this, and I'm going to talk to Cuck Philosophy, who is a leftist YouTuber who I very much enjoy. Maybe we'll touch on this, but moreover, I think the question is just, is it how can we gain more allies and lose the liabilities that we've accumulated in the past 2 years in the distant right? And I think this is really what Millennial Woes conversation is about. Now, I have half an hour more. I think I can talk about this in the abstract. I don't think I'm going to be able to. I don't think I'm going to be able to watch any of these videos. But let's just go to Millennial Woes' page. Sorry, you got a little bit of sound there. And let's talk about his series, which I'm not so sure his series is over. So, Millennial Woes, after really having published no videos on his main channel for really the better part of 8 months, except for videos complaining about things like getting banned from Twitter. So he releases a series of videos that I think are very, very, very important. and I forget what ANC stands for. I think it's like asceticism and something else. And he largely goes over elements in his own life and elements in the alt-right movement that have led it to be isolated, that have led it to essentially get locked into an echo chamber. And so I think that this is, I know people are, I see in the chat, and I just caught this from the corner of my eye, people are asking, oh, why are people so obsessed with millennial woes? They're obsessed with millennial woes, and I'm not obsessed, but the reason why I consider him a useful foil, a useful person on the internet, is his sincerity, his honesty, and his ability to talk about mistakes in a way that is very, very direct, and something that I can genuinely learn from, even though I might disagree with him. And this series that he's currently published is gold. It is the great example of that. So just to go over it roughly, and if people have time and they're not put off by people who are from a racialist persuasion, they might want to scan these videos to see what they're about. He goes over in the first two how he's been psychologically harmed by just getting locked into this echo chamber. And then he goes on to, what psychological effects this has happened in episode 2. In episode 3, it starts getting really interesting when he starts talking about the alt-right as a movement and how it's attracted a particular kind of person. Now, this video was very, very similar to a video that I released on the same day, or recorded on the same day, which was how super chats are killing the alt-right. Essentially, it is the alt-right can't keep out people that it can't control. And unlike Antifa, we can't just recontextualize this stuff. This will kill any right-wing movement. I think it's already killed the alt-right, and it will kill any dissident right movement if you can't control your message and you can't control your people. And then the fourth one, he goes over why there's a need to have a more cultural perspective, to have a thicker community. And then he just goes over where the alt-right has found itself in, right? And it's and eventually, like, all these things start building up to I think his latest ones, which are the fact that it's been 2 years since the alt-right has moved on to the stage politically, and there is still no community. There's no large group of people who are Okay, so there probably was a hiccup there. I'm going to sort of restart my sentence, and hopefully people are able to. Actually, I'll take a pause here and continue with my talk in 5 minutes when people see that I'm still actually talking here. So I guess the alt-right has been around for 2 years. Like not as an internet community, but as a real political force. It's been around for 2 years. That's a long time. That's a long time for a movement that is supposed to be as prominent as it is in dissident right circles. And it has not been able to develop a community. And it's not been able to develop any kind of moderate appeal, any kind of ability to convert people from a progressive point of view. And as such, it's just been in this position where very, very desperate people come onto it. And it's not that there isn't, I think, a certain kind of energy on the right. I think that there is. But the problem is that there's no organization and community around that energy. People have ideas, they kick them around, and they never get done. People want to build something, but they don't communicate with the other people who want to build it. They just have this idea, it goes off into the ether, and it gets totally unresolved. And so I think what Millennial Woes is building to is the fact that we don't have any control over purity spiraling. We don't have any control over what people are putting into their actual productive projects, right? The productive projects get isolated because it's easy to purity spiral, right? It's easy to make large gestures. It's easy to do all of these things like rage against conspiracy theories. It's easy to dream up a conspiracy theory. It's hard to build a place that has some kind of quality control on message. And and that is what the alt-right's totally been unable to build in the last 2 years. And it's that exact thing that people on the right have to start looking to build right now. And we're going to have to essentially just go back to the fundamentals to do it. What does the left not want to do? What is the winning move in this game of tactics? The left does not want to see a thick community. And by thick, I mean a community that's not just narrowly focused on politics, but has other dimensions to it, that has spiritual dimensions, that has artistic dimensions, that has cultural dimensions that extend to things that you can do in real life. The left does not want to see a thick cultural community that can appeal to ordinary people and that counter-signals their base assumptions in the public space. That's what they don't want, and that's what we have to produce. They also don't want to see a movement like this that does not trip over magical words. And I know I have a whole series on magical words, but I'll say it again. What is a magical word? A magical word is a word that immediately identifies you as part of the bad group. You do not want to use magical words that your opponent has designed for you. That is a losing strategy that will ruin your movement, because when you start using magical words, like the 14 words, which is the perfect example, that makes it easy for the authorities to cut you out of the crowd and destroy you. And when you do that, when your leadership starts going down, right? When your controlled and rational leadership starts getting censored, then the purity spiraling takes root. Then the only thing you can do is invent conspiracy theories. And this leads to the exact thing the left wants. They want fringe people saying ridiculous things about conspiracies. They want people talking about vague notions about the Great Replacement that are easy to recharacterize as anti-Semitic attacks. And they want this to be done in a way that can be easily censored by social media and cut out of mainstream discourse, and be put in a way that will make any kind of appeal to moderates and, yes, progressives totally impossible. The right cannot do this. The right has to stop saying magic words. You know, you can say the sentiments as long as you don't use the magical words, and the magic words are easy to see, right? I mean, I have a whole series pointing them out, but there are I think people know that these things are stigmatized. So I see Doragoon01 saying, are there inverses of magic words that not saying them has power? Well, that kind of is like magic words. I mean, if you were to say, I think that all peoples deserve a homeland, and that includes people of the European diaspora and of the European continent. How is anyone going to object to that? No one can object to that. Or I don't know, maybe they would. But in order to object to that, you have to be a radical who just wants to melt down all ethnic distinction, which the left cannot actually claim. If you say the 14 words, they will censor you. And you know, I don't want to say you deserve to get censored, but I mean, come on. I mean, we know how this works, right? I mean, like, are we still in this sort of like, again, are we in this enlightenment trap where if you translate it to a statement that won't get you censored, you shouldn't get censored for it? Well, that's not how human society works. We know it's not how human society works. So take that enlightenment empiricism and apply it to an empirical analysis to how our society actually works and not how we wish it would work. Okay, I'm going to get Trudel Tom on here, but I'm going to continue with my point here. We have to go back to the fundamentals of this process, and we have to go, okay, what is the critical propositions that characterize a counter-progressive movement? And I am partially paraphrasing Mencius Mollbuck when I say this, but there's only two of them. The first one is that in the West, our posterity, our peoples, our culture, our religions, our spirituality, all of these things are worth preserving. They're worth preserving. And I don't think that that doesn't mean that we have to do unethical things to preserve them, but just that they're worth preserving. And then the second observation is our present system, our present cultural order, for no ethically necessary reason, is making it impossible to preserve the posterity, our cultural posterity, our national posterity into the future. Those two observations essentially make you an ally of the distant right. They make you an opponent of modern progressivism and of many elements of the modern political order. So, and that's all you need. And that should comprise half of National Review conservatives, all everyone on these internet communities that are racialist and non-racialist on the distant right, everyone who currently identifies as the distant right, then everyone who is on the distant right obviously falls into this category. And also a large number of progressives do too. A large number of progressives would agree with that statement. And so if you go back to those fundamentals, you immediately have a big political coalition with a lot of very, very well-educated and effective people who are willing to work together for an end. And that's how you start building community. So I see I kind of laughed when I saw this one. Someone saying, do you not see that you're becoming the purity spiral? Okay, well, that's useful. You can tell me how I'm purity spiraling. I don't see how boiling down the distant right into 2 points that almost everyone, except for people actively looking to destroy Western societies, is purity spiraling. It's doing the exact opposite. It's giving us a framework for constructing a big tent. And this sort of gets back to I think, what Millennial Woes' problem is. I think Millennial Woes was at his strongest when he was just talking about his opinions, his view of the world. I mean, even his racialist stuff. I mean, I don't agree with it. I don't like it. But I mean, it was his genuine emotion, right? And this was something that I thought was it was interesting to see. Millennial Woes was at his weakest when he was trying to apologize for some specific movement that he didn't actually control, the alt-right. And I think the thing is that I think he's realizing that nothing like this can work. It's got to be a big movement. It's got to be something that a lot of people can get on board with. It's got to be something that tempts progressives. That Slavoj Žižek had this moment where he had this, I forget the exact phrase, and I should probably look this up and read it on a stream, where he kind of got tempted to say, hey, you know what? All of these nationalists and reactionaries, they're more revolutionary than the communists. And that's absolutely true. We are a threat in a way that the communists just aren't. But he was tempted. He was tempted by reactionary ideas. And if you're not tempting your opposition as someone on their reactionary side, I don't think we're doing this correctly. And I think Millennial Woes is realizing this. It's something that I talk about very, very frequently. And this has got to be a cornerstone of whatever we have going forward. I don't want to preview this Cuck Philosophy stream too much. But I think I want to use this as, I don't know how well I'll do in discussing, but I want to keep it very friendly. And at all times, I want to put it to Cuck Philosophy. You're a thoughtful guy. Have you ever considered right-wing ideas? Have you ever considered working together with us? We can work together to remove many of the pathological features of our society. Like, say, for instance, the modern rating political order that's globalist, or that is embodied in places like the EU. You're revolutionaries, right? So, I mean, that means you probably would want to destroy large power structures like the European Union. It seems like a common element of disagreement, of an agreement. And moreover, if you're a revolutionary and you want all of these things like genuine experiences, genuine human relationships, well, that's what people on the right wing want too. Cuck Philosophy had a video this week about Hellraiser and about the border experiences of asceticism and spirituality. I agree with that. That's what I want, these human experiences as well. That's the whole point. And so, that's, why can't we work together on that? If we're both fighting for humanity, why can't we work together? Why can't we build something? Now, I don't know if I necessarily want to trust people who are communists, but if they are working together for a political goal that leaves people of a reactionary and traditionalist persuasion in more of a controlling position, I don't see why not. And again, if we're not trying to convert people, I think you're doing something wrong. I think the question always should be, why aren't you a reactionary? Why aren't you a traditionalist? This is something that rational people should just agree on. So, and I'm in the process of making a video again also about forgiveness. And I also think that this isn't something that the left is going to not understand this. but its own ability, and this is something that Millennial Woes brought up in that excellent series that I brought up. Millennial Woes brought this fact that he's never going to be forgiven, and you saw this in the an actual joke video. And they're right. I mean, Millennial Woes has been identified as a racist by the British tabloids. So at that point, given how progressives are currently setting up this idea of racialism in modern society, given this, they're never going to let this guy live this down. I mean, he could be a saint from now on. They're never going to let him do anything without them going after him, because they've created racialism and racism as the big boogeyman, and they've identified him as adherent to this ideology. He's renounced violence. Does that mean they're going to go like, oh, he renounces violence? No, of course not. They're going to insinuate that he secretly believes that. And the same thing is true for for possible racialism or racism, right? If Millennial Woes today became a civic nationalist or an urbanist, or, a non-racialist reactionary or non-racialist traditionalist, like I consider myself, would they forgive him? Well, no, of course not. They wouldn't, right? They would go after him and go like, oh, guess what? These new right-wing beliefs are a thin veneer for your secret racism. The only way that they'd forgive him is if he actively renounced all right-wing beliefs and actively worked with them to destroy right-wing movements, and continuously did that. The second he adopted any counter-progressive view, his forgiveness would be revoked, and they'd be back to calling him a racist and trying to get him fired from his careers. Whatever would be open to him at that stage anyway. So, I mean, this offer of forgiveness on the part of the left is just purely a lie. And I use lie in this context because I can't think of any word for it. It's actively deceptive in an attempt to rob a person of his dignity, and to me that's a lie. It's an ugly lie at that. So I have a super chat here. Again, $9.99 from the Beast. Thank you very much again for your contribution. And he says, I've heard you trashed on TRS before because of your alt-hype video, but I'd really love to see a connection. I love your strategy with their energy and humor. However, I think I'm being too hopeful. C'est la vie. Okay, well, c'est la vie. Well, thank you very much. Yeah, I think that there's, I want to copy the Murdoch guy saying, hey, if you're pro me, then I'm pro you. If you're dedicated to preserving humanity and the posterity of the West into the future, I don't care if you're from the left, I don't care if you're from the right. I think we're working together for the same goal. If you think that our current system is pathological to that end, the whole goal we have right now is to build new institutions that can secure that preservation into the future, in the same way that Apple has its bottom line secured into the future, in the same way that the university has its own political mission secured into the future. There needs to be new corporate entities that take this objective seriously and that find productive people, that find well-adjusted people to defend this into the future. And that is the goal that the right wing has. And I do not see why we should be at total cross purposes at people who want to do something on the left. If you're an anarchist and you want to separate from the global order and create your own little anarchist utopia, then Godspeed to you. We can work together to create a reality that's conducive to that, that's conducive to new experiments, that's conducive to people breaking off from it. And they say they want that. So why not work together with us to produce that? And I think that this is something that we can quite easily, I don't know if we can procure this, because I think the left is honestly lying to itself, but we can constantly bring this up to them. We can constantly show them that they're making this request and we are being the people in good faith who are reaching out a hand, and it's never reciprocated. And if you do this enough, you will get converts from the left and you will expand the base of the right. So with that, and since I have a hard stop at 12:30, I'm going to treat this as sort of the cutoff point for me making my actual point. I'll reiterate some of these things about forgiveness. I'm going to make an actual video on this. And so the rest will be, the next 10 or 15 minutes will be dedicated to just answering people's super chats, people's questions. Hopefully, I know this was a very short DistAns series. And I'm going to reiterate, there's going to be a stream on this channel, and approximately 6 or so hours, depending on my technical problems. I had to do this remotely, so there might be some delay. It's going to be for 6 hours. It's going to be tonight, and I am not going to be speaking on it. The whole idea of this stream, Vox Mortuus, is to let the past speak in its own words, and for us to listen and learn something from it. It defeats the purpose for me speaking on it. So you can super chat it, but the super chats will not be read. Either I'm going to read them on the next stream, or, if I don't get a chance to stream, they might go unread and they'll be donations to the channel, which I very much appreciate. Now, in the future, I might set up something where this can be a charitable thing. I don't want Vox Mortuus to be something where I benefit. I want this to be something for the community. I want this to be something that can be given to people so they can learn from it. And, insofar as my inclinations, I would really like to, be able to do this professionally. I currently can't. But insofar as my mission in me running this channel and me running the blog and me running Via Obscura Radio, I want to, as much as possible, be a tool to help people of a right-wing persuasion. Now, I know the objection. Oh my God, you call up people like J.F. Gariepi and you go against people like the alt-right and say that the movement's dead. I'm just calling balls and strikes. Like, I have nothing against people who are associated with a label alt-right. I don't even have anything against people who want to create, who want to go off and try a social experiment where they have their own little ethically organized community. Obviously, I'm not that person, but I don't have any problem with separatists. And insofar as you're a person who wants to preserve the posterity of the West, we're fundamentally allies, and I want to help this process. I wanted to help the dissident right come to some prominence, to avoid the issues it's been having. And part of that, however, is just calling out bullshit when I see it. I didn't mean to run down JF with that little image that I had in my last video. Actually, the only reason I posted it was I wanted to show how super chats can be used to superimpose insane views onto authority figures that might not endorse those views. So the purpose of the image was not that JF endorsed violence, but that he might accidentally become the mouthpiece to certain views that he did not himself hold. Now, maybe JF doesn't think that we should point out how people could accidentally fall into ideologies. Perhaps he's changed his view on that, and if he's changed his view on that, maybe I can change my expression of my frustration on that regard. Certainly, he didn't believe that was the case when we talked together 8 months ago. But it looks like there's another super chat here. Oh dear, I'll have to reload the chat. Okay, the super chat is from Pseudo-Analysis for $2. Thank you for the contribution. The left is revolutionary, not secessionist. Absolutely right. The left is technically revolutionary. It's technically globalist. It's totalitarian technically as well. But the problem is the propaganda doesn't say that. Their propaganda for the last 100 years is that they're for localism. They're for separation. They're for the small guy. They're for individual cultures' self-determination. They're for indigenous rights. So while deep down inside, where some of them might not even know it, they are fundamentally totalitarian and revolutionary. We can use secessionist language. We can use indigenous language. We can use localist language to make them confront the reality of their own beliefs. And when they confront the reality of their own beliefs, a lot of people who call themselves left right now, especially a lot of people who are in a position like cut philosophy, I think, they will have to come face to face with the fact that they should be considering right-wing views. And maybe they should even consider joining the right themselves. And I think this is something that we have to put to them, and we have to deny them reasons that people should not consider our ideas seriously. Because when they consider our ideas seriously, they will start losing people, and they'll start losing very intelligent, productive people. Oh, and before I answer the next super chat, now Millennial Woes has said this, that the right needs to get a new class, a new kind of person in it. And I don't want to leave behind the people who are currently on the right, who are people who might come from more troubled backgrounds. I think it's our mission to help them up right? To make them more productive, to make them think more like professionals, right? But the reality is that we can't be a movement of troubled people operating in the mode that troubled people operate in, which is a depressive mode, which is a conspiratorial mode, which is a mode that tries to get you to find causes outside of yourself that you can blame everything on, and to feel good about your own decline. We can't do that. And so we either have to train up a new class of leaders, or we have to attract more of the leadership class. And this is something that we're going to be working on. And when that happens, when more productive people come onto the movement, they're going to bring up people. They're going to be like, oh, hey, you have an idea about doing this radio project? Well, as opposed to just saying it on a Millennial Woes live stream, how about you meet up with me on Friday with this, and this other person who also want to do something similar, and we can start creating our own little company to do it. We can hop up a website. 6 hours, website's hopped up immediately. And how about you write this article and I'll edit it and we can put it on the website. This is what productive people will start doing to the movement. And when people get involved in that, even troubled people, they'll start becoming masters of their own destiny. We'll start getting actual activists that know how to conduct themselves and how to get things done. And that's what I sincerely hope for. Okay, so another super chat for $4.99. Thank you very much for the contribution from Kyle Reisner. The best leftist YouTuber is Douglas Lane from Zero Books. I know you've been having a bad luck talking to leftists, but I would die to hear you two talk. I don't know if I've contacted him. I really should. It sounds like a person I should contact with. There's nothing I like talking to, no one I like talking to more than people like Cuck Philosophy, educated leftists who have an open mind. There's a reason why the best Mencius Mollbuck essay was an open letter to an open-minded progressive. Because the right is at its best when it's in a mode, when it's in a mode that it can explain itself to someone from the outside, and where it's talking to somebody who may have progressive assumptions that it's trying to convert. Because, surprise, surprise, most of society at this point, after 60 years of having their educational and media institutions dominated by the left, has mostly progressive assumptions in it. So if we're not speaking to people in some capacity who have progressive assumptions, I don't think we're speaking to the real body of people. And I know right now, this DistAns, I'm largely speaking to people on the right. I'm not speaking to people on the left. And this is one of the reasons that when I hit 20,000 subscribers, it's most likely that things like this are going to go onto an alternative channel. But for the time being, I'll have to sort of mix my peas and my carrots and have streams where I talk to people on the right and places where I talk to people on the left sort of occupy the same internet space. Again, this is just the natural growing process of the community we have here, and you know what I think is necessary. Someone I think commenting on the super chat says these guys are liberals. If you want to talk to non-liberal leftists, talk to Jason Unruhi or Caleb Maupin. Oh my God, there's no way that Jason Unruhi is going to talk to me. The guy has pictures of him like holding a bat with nails in it, going like, I have something to tell you, Trump supporters, lol. I mean, like, if he's going to hit a Trump supporter over the head with a bat with nails in it, I mean, what is he going to react to, a reactionary like myself? Probably nothing. He's not going to want to talk to me. He's just going to want to hit me. I mean, maybe it would be good television. It would be good YouTube drama television to have Jason on this channel and talk. But I would be expecting a total shit show. So I mean, and there's a difference between Antifa types. I mean, Jason, I don't want to run the guy down, but I'm going to run him down. Jason Unruhi is someone who is very obviously a very, very stupid man. Like, he comes off as a stupid man. Like, he projects as a stupid man, and I'm not so sure I want him in a right wing. Like, he go be a third worldist in Antifa. Jason Unruhi is exactly the kind of person I want in Antifa. A guy who runs around with a spiked bat trying to bop supporters of a president that 40% of this country support. Like, I don't want the right-wing version of that. I want the right-wing version of cuck philosophy. I want the right-wing version of Slava Zizek. I want the right-wing version of productive people who do productive things. I mean, I might even be amenable to the right-wing version of ContraPoints, although God knows what that would look like. It certainly wouldn't be as gross. But the idea is people who produce stuff, intellectual arguments or high production value entertainment, that's the way we need to be thinking right now. We need to be thinking about what is the right-wing version of NPR. What is the right-wing version of Prairie Home Companion? So, I don't know. Bronx Blogger, I might try to get him back on. We'll see. We had a disagreement over white identity in which he cussed me out using racial slurs against white people and blocked me and then unblocked me. And once people take a genuine question, like, oh, is it all right to identify as white? And they're like, honky, 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 honky. Like, I start losing interest in them. I mean, that's crude. That's what stupid people do. And I don't know what do I really have to gain from interacting with Bronx Blogger. We already had a conversation about this in which he tried to like skirt around the fact that he essentially said he was against any kind of separatism. That was for the right wing, but he couldn't say that, right? Because anarchism is built on the opposite principle. It's on the leave principle. So he couldn't say that. Okay, this isn't an reply and it's not a super chat. A right-wing version of Prairie Home Companion is not America First. I'm going to repeat this. A right-wing version of Prairie Home Companion is not America First. Chris Thiele is a likable character. And although Garrison Keillor is a little bit slimy, he's not Nick Fuentes. Nick Fuentes could not possibly appeal to anybody who is not 100% on board with the MAGA stuff, if not stuff further to the right of him. He does not have any credibility in leftist circles, whereas Prairie Home Companion, and I know it's progressive to the core, I know it does all these little dishonest things that really get on my nerve, I still like it. I love American folk music. I love Chris Thiele, who's the new co-host, or who's the new host. And their design of old-fashioned radio is brilliant. Conservatives like Prairie Home Companion. They have to like it. It's designed to appeal to the conservative sentimentality, right? We do not have any media that's designed to appeal to people of a natural progressive mentality. So, yeah. That being said, let's see if I can get how many more time do I have. Only have 3 more minutes. I would love to talk to you. I've been developing a materialist analysis of race realism. No, I don't really want to have a discussion of race realism on this channel. I mean, I appreciate it. If you have an argument against race realism and you want to do a debate on it, I think that there's a lot of channels. I mean, I might host that, right? Like a debate. I don't like there's channels dedicated to race realism, like JS channels basically dedicated to that. So it's just not the audience I'm going for, and it's not me helping. If this channel becomes a race realism channel or even an anti-race realism channel, again, I'm totally I am not disclosing my beliefs on this topic. It will hurt any attempts to form a dissident right community, because that is a reason for them to shut down this channel and others. What do you think of liberation theology? In its strong form, it's a heresy. There have been watered down versions of liberation theology that are more or less unobjectionable. I certainly believe in rerum novarum and Catholic social justice, and if it's just that, then I have no problem with it. But I do not like this whole we're going to make communism part of Catholic theology. I think Distributist's problem is that he conflates leftists with liberals. I don't know. I don't think cuck philosophy is a leftist. I mean, when I say liberal, I usually mean Sargon types, which is not who I'm talking about with when I say leftists. I think that there is opportunity to convert people from both the left and the liberal side, and I think that's where we need to be looking for if we're going to go forward on with any kind of serious right-wing movement. We are coming up on time. I can take one last. I will go into a grace period and go for 5 minutes in case there's a super chat that appears. But please don't send a super chat after 12:30 because I most likely, or wherever it is between the half of the hour, wherever it is in your time zone, because I most likely won't be able to pick it up. But anyway, yeah, I do hope that people start thinking about these things more, because I think this is where the conversation needs to go. Is there anywhere I could message you where you can contact me via email at datadistributist@gmail.com? You can friend me on Discord. I am the Distributist. I have a Discord server. I think there's a link in the description of this video. I don't think it is old. And yeah, those are the two best places to message me. Email is usually the best. I have a Skype at modern.distributist. That's just the Skype address. I use that also. So lots of ways to get into contact with me. I love to hear from people. I'm trying to say, like I said, I'm trying to organize more people to start writing for Via Obscura to get their ideas out there so they can get a taste of how it is to participate in a conversation that I think is long overdue. I want to be, as much as possible, a helpful contribute. I want to, as much as possible, help people in their intellectual developments on the right, and to be a resource for them. So any indication of how I can be a resource for you is something that I'm interested in hearing. Any video I can do that you think would be helpful. It isn't like, it can't be something that everyone's already done. Like if it's like, oh, do a video on race realism. Oh, like there's whole channels to that. Like there's literally, like JF is literally supposedly an expert on that, right? So like, what could I say that he's not going to be more credible? Like, so that's not something that I can help with, right? And neither is like, don't criticize people on the right when they do things that are stupid. Like that's also not helpful. I mean, I understand that it creates drama. But if I stop calling out people on the right's mistakes, then I might as well then I think I lose a lot of my credibility, right? I lose a lot of my credibility when I do that, and I don't become a resource for you guys. I don't help. Could you do a video on why you consider progressivism to be a semi-continuation of Protestantism? Well, I will. A video series that I'm working on is called Moldbug in Minutes, because this is not my idea. I've repeated it, but it's not my idea. It's Mencius Moldbug's idea, aka it's Curtis Yavin's idea. You can read his voluminous blog at Unqualified Reservations. But what I intend to do, and I'm working on this project, and I should have it done before Christmas, is to take Moldbug and take each of his 4 main essays, Gentle Introduction to Unqualified Reservations, How Dawkins Got Pwned, Open Letter to an Open-Minded Progressive, and the Patchwork one, and condense them into 20-minute talks where I go forward with animations and explain all the major points without going into the huge digressions that Moldbug always loves going into. I kind of liked Moldbugian digressions. I find them entertaining and cute, but they also make his posts book length. And I think if people want to hear, for instance, why progressivism, and less so communism, but communism has kind of cross-pollinated a little bit, why progressivism is essentially progressive Christianity autonomized from God belief, then I'll definitely do a 20-minute or 50-minute video. I'll try to keep it as short as possible on the seminal Moldbugian essay, How Dawkins Got Pwned. But we are coming up on the grace period. I'll just see if I can lasso a few more tweets before I hit the stop button. Again, thanks everyone for tuning in and joining me on this one. There's going to be another live stream in about 6 or so hours, and I will not be speaking on that. But you're welcome to comment. Even welcome to Super Chat if you want to make a donation to this channel. But it's just enjoy the old-timey radio sounds. This particular Vox Mortuus is going to be dedicated to one of my favorite my favorite radio personalities of all time. He passed away this year. His name was Joe Frank, and he was a brilliant radio narrator, someone who's never been equaled. He told sort of surreal stories that combined autobiographical elements with reality, and it's sort of creative surreal fiction, right? Basically taking someone he had heard about and exaggerating to a humorous extent, like a surreal extent, something that would never ever happen in the real life. And then it became sort of a form of poetry. And he passed away in January this year, right after I did my initial Vox Mortuus. And I think that people should know who Joe Frank is, and they should buy all this stuff because he was a great person. And so in honor of him, I'm putting some samples of his stuff, along with a talk from Chesterton and Orson Welles and poetry from Ezra Pound and old music from the 30s and 40s, just to give you a sense of what old-timey radio would be like. Which again, I'm a huge fan of, which is probably why I like Prairie Home Companion. But it looks like we're coming up on as someone says, what do you read? Otto Weiniger? I haven't. I think he's on my list, but I haven't. And yeah, I'd love to interview Vox Day. He would be a good person to interview for Via Obscura Radio. I haven't gotten around to mailing him. My priority for big names right now is Nick Land, because I think he's much closer to my own ideology than Vox Day is. But I'm going to. I definitely would consider it. But at any rate, I think that is more or less the end of the grace period. Thanks everyone for your super chats and your participation on this very, very early and very, very disorganized DistAns 6.0. And I will bid everyone a good rest of the day, a happy Halloween, and I will be seeing you, but certainly not hearing you, and certainly not speaking to you tonight for Old Timey Radio with Vox Mortuus Radio. Thank you very much. Have a good night.